Human feelings and needs. In the previous lesson, we talked about the importance of identifying a need in another person, especially when we don't meet eye to eye with them. When we're in a conflict, we tend to get stuck in their strategies or their actions that are taken by them, and we don't delve into finding out what the needs are behind their actions. But when we do, we find ways to connect with the person, we find ways to empathize with the person, and we find ways to build relationships with the person. In this lesson, we'll be focusing on the role of feelings in building relationships. Feelings are actually expressions of our needs met or not met, and these feelings can be expressed in many different ways. Sometimes, poor expressions of feelings during conflicts can be detrimental to the relationships. In this lesson, we'll be exploring how we can express feelings constructively to build relationships. Right now, I'm going to be sharing with you a short clip of a conversation taking place between two people. I'm going to show the clip without sound so you can pay attention to the expression of different emotions that the individuals are portraying. See if you can identify the different emotions that show up. So I'd like to ask you to give it a guess what this conversation's about. Well, this was an argument between two people, and you could probably tell that without hearing the words expressed by these individuals based on the expressions of their emotions, maybe through their facial expressions and their body language. So, in a dialogue, feelings are always present and they are a powerful vector or a driving force in a conversation. The last clip I showed was quite an overt expression of emotions by both parties. But even in regular, not highly emotional interactions, feelings are always present to some degree. So even if feelings are very subtle, like you are a little bit tired or a little bit nervous or a little bit annoyed, and when someone says, "Can you just clean your room a little bit?" This can change the tone of how the conversation goes or how you react to the situation. So, even though you might not be explicitly aware of what emotions you're experiencing, they're almost always present to some degree. Emotions can also disconnect us from our presence and intention in dialogue and in relationships when they're not handled properly. Let's say that you're having a problem with someone and you go to the person with an intention to resolve the issue. But in a conversation, you get heated up and experience extreme anger. You might raise your voice or say things that are hurtful, and by the time you notice, you might be disconnected from your original intention to resolve the issue. And this can be destructive to the building of relationships. So, what are the different ways in which we often react to the feelings that show up? Well, there are two extreme ways to express our emotions, which are not useful. On one end is expressing our emotions reactively. This can show up in a form of blaming or snapping and yelling at someone. And if you remember the last time you reacted this way, you can probably remember this did not go very well and it led to some form of disconnection between two people. It also comes at a cost in goodwill, trust, or the relationship, which means that when you blame someone or yell at someone, you might get your way, but it will cost trust that you have from the other person and building a good relationship with the person. Now, on the other end of the scale, you might react to emotions by suppressing them, by denying that they even exist or ignoring them. Even if you're trying to pretend that the emotions don't exist, they often seep into a conversation you're having with the other person. And let's say that you're angry, but you're trying to suppress it, then it makes it very difficult for you to hear the other person. If the other person is experiencing something similar, it'll be very difficult for them to hear you as well. If you can imagine how this will show up in a different form of communication, such as an email, it comes in a form of a passive aggressive email. You might have received one like this in the past, in which the sender is saying that everything is okay, but the tone is of anger and frustration. And when you receive it, you feel that something is not quite right, and it can lead to confusion or mistrust between two people. So, expressing our feelings either reactively or in suppressing manners are not helpful in building relationships. And there is a healthy middle ground, which is to constructively express our emotions. When we can express our emotions constructively, it really de escalates tension between two individuals. And when it de escalates tension, we are in a space where we can give each other more choices in how we respond, even when we are not agreeing with each other. When we constructively express our emotions, we can provide important information about our needs. Now, we'll talk more about this in the later section of the clip. Now, in order for us to be able to constructively express our emotions, we have to be aware of our own feelings. And the more we are aware of our emotions, the less likely we are to unconsciously react and instead consciously choose how we participate in the conversation. So, in working with our feelings, we can train our attention in the following. First, we can train in identifying and naming the feelings that show up. How often do we pause in the middle of a conversation and go, oh, yeah, right now I'm experiencing confusion, or right now I'm experiencing joy? So it's important to physically pause and ground yourselves to the present by bringing your attention to your breath or your center line or an object, and just be able to name the feelings that are showing up. And after that, the second step is to accept and be aware of your feelings in a balanced and non reactive way. So rather than expressing your emotions in a reactive way or trying to suppress your emotions, you can just be aware that anger is there or that confusion is there and just accept it and just let it be. And the next step is to hear and express them without blame or judgment. Now, this is the most important step that I want to emphasize to you all. When we're experiencing feelings of discomfort like anger or like extreme sadness, we often want to express them reactively and blame the other person for causing such emotions within us. But what's really important is that we find ways to not do that, and we find ways to express these emotions constructively. So, in the next section of the clip, I'll be sharing with you ways in which we can express our emotions in a constructive way. So, at this point, if you wish to take a break, feel free to do so. Pause the video and get yourself a nice cup of tea or coffee and take some time to breathe. So, what is a feeling or emotion? Now, the formal definition of emotion is the feelings that are directly felt in our body, and they're different from our thoughts or interpretations or judgments about a situation. So, I'm going to be showing some phrases here, and as you see these phrases, I like to ask yourself, is this a feeling or is this not a feeling? Now, one of the things I explained in the previous section of the clip as something important to do is to identify and name your feeling, to accept that, and to share that with the other person in a non judgmental or non blaming way. So, I'm going to be explaining in this section how we can share our emotions in such a manner. Now, there are different ways to express the same emotional experience, and they come in a form of feeling and non feeling words. Feeling words are words like I feel perplexed, or joy, or uncomfortable, or frightened. These are emotions that are directly felt in our body that are separate from our thoughts, interpretations, or judgments about a situation. So, for example, we might be sitting together at a lunch table, you and then we ran out of things to say to each other. And if you thought, this is so awkward, why did I sit here? Well, this is a judgment about a situation. But what you may actually be experiencing in terms of feelings may be discomfort. You may be feeling uncomfortable, or you may be feeling a little bit scared. So, feelings are again emotions that are directly felt in your body. Now, some of the phrases that I showed you in the previous slide were non feeling words. These are expressed in ways like I feel blamed, judged, ignored, unappreciated, or bullied. These are actually not feelings because they say more about what I think the other person is doing to me than how I actually might be feeling inside. If I'm feeling blamed or if I'm feeling judged, I want to ask myself how I actually might be feeling inside my body. So, how I might actually be feeling might be hurt or angry or confused, but this is separate from the judgment that I might be making about the other person. So, it's very important to know the difference between feeling words and non feeling words. Now, the last category, this might be unique to English and a few other languages, including your own. And this is when we can use I feel, but follow it with something that is actually not a feeling. This category is non feeling grammar. So, for example, you might say, I feel that you are disturbing others, or I feel like you are overcomplicating things. Notice that whatever follows I feel is actually not a feeling. It might be what the other person is doing or your judgment that you have of the other person. So this is a thought. So it's important that when you use the phrase I feel, that you express your emotion and not a thought. Now, when you are involved in a conversation where you are not meeting eye to eye with someone, using non feeling words or non feeling grammar can actually bring up defensiveness in the other person. Now, this is because your statement can be connected to blame. So, to reinforce this idea, imagine that this is your heart where you feel, and you're involved in a conversation and you say, I feel ignored, blamed, judged, or attacked. But what you're actually feeling inside could be that you are hurt, or sad, or angry, or confused. But when you say I feel ignored or blamed, this is attached to a story that you have about the other person, and it's of a judgment that you're making about the other person. So if you express it in this way, you're going to increase defensiveness in the other person, and this usually doesn't lead to a very productive or constructive conversation with the other person. So, what's important in a conversation is that you actually notice when you're using non feeling words or grammar. And when you are, you want to stop and inquire. When I tell myself that I feel manipulated, how do I actually feel inside? And when you ask yourself this, listen to and name the actual emotion you are experiencing underneath that thought and share that instead of what you did previously, which is a non feeling word or grammar. So, in the next section of the clip, I'll be delving more into how we can express our emotions with less blame by understanding where feelings really come from. So, at this point, as we shift our focus slightly, if you wish to take a break, feel free to do so. Pause the video and give yourself some time for a nice stretch. In this section of the clip, I want to share with you about when feelings arise because there are many misconceptions around that. So, in our life, things happen, and these are our events in our lives. This could be that someone left dirty dishes in the kitchen sink or that someone in your group didn't show up on time for a group project meeting. Now, with these events comes particular emotions that show up within you. So it could be frustration that shows up because there are dirty dishes in the sink, or it could be anger for your teammate not showing up on time. And we tend to think that it is purely these events that have led us to experience these emotions. But is this really the case? Events are actually only triggers for these emotions showing up, but they are not directly tied to each other. In fact, they're only indirectly tied to each other. In between events and emotions, there's another thing, which are needs that we have as humans and the meanings that we place on the different events that we face. And these needs and the meanings that we place are actually the root cause of the emotions that show up within us. So, for example, in the case of someone not showing up on time for your group project meeting, it has led us to feel angry, but what's the need that has led us to feel this emotion? There might be a need for responsibility, a need for effectiveness and efficiency in the teamwork, and to produce a product that is of good quality. So these could be the needs that you may have had and have led you to the emotion of anger. In another example of someone leaving dirty dishes, this is an event. My need could be that I value cleanliness. And since this is not met, that's the reason why I feel frustration. So, an event is usually just a trigger for a certain emotion, but behind any event, there are needs that are either met or not met. And this is the root cause for an emotion. So, just to illustrate this relationship, imagine that you are in an airplane and two seats down, there is a baby wailing. Now, this is an event that there is a baby crying nonstop. Now, on the airplane, there are different kinds of people. So, person A could be a businessman and he has gone on three different trips in the last week and he's super tired. And so, when he hears a baby crying, he feels frustration. So, this is one emotional reaction. Person B could be a mom who has raised three kids of her own, and when she hears a baby cry, this is the same event, but then her emotional reaction could be one of compassion for the mother who is having to look after the baby. Person C could be the flight attendant, and this person's emotional reaction could be one of worry for the other passengers. In this case, the event is the same that the baby is crying, but we have three different reactions in terms of the emotions that arise. This is because it's not the event that has caused the emotion, but each of us has different needs. So, in the case of the businessman, he could have felt frustration because he had a need for deep rest. The mother may have felt compassion because she has a need to care for the young ones. Or for person C, which is a flight attendant, they might feel worried because they have a need to be effective in their job. And giving passengers a comfortable experience is very important to them. So, based on this example, the needs are driving the different emotions. If the events and emotions are directly tied to each other, then what we would find is that for any given event, the emotional reactions of various individuals involved would be exactly the same. But this is not the case. So, what's important to remember is that we are responsible for our actions and our reactions. For any emotion that we feel, we tend to point our fingers to other people and say, you are the one that has made me feel this way, or you are the one that has caused this particular emotion. But it's important to acknowledge that our emotions come from our needs that are either met or not met. So, moving forward, it's very important to take responsibility for our own feelings. One of the principles that I want to share is that the more we take responsibility for our feelings and connect them to our needs rather than others' actions, the easier it is for others to hear us. So, let's say in the case of someone leaving dirty dishes in the kitchen sink, it's usually the case that we feel frustrations, but it's important to recognize where that frustrations come from. Rather than approaching the person leaving the dirty dishes and saying, I feel frustrated because you didn't wash the dishes. Well, if I were to say to the person, I feel frustrated because it's important to me that this house is clean. If you imagine to be in the shoes of the person who left the dirty dishes, which one are you likely to hear more? Or which one are you likely to accept more? So it's important that our feelings are not connected to a blame for the other person, but rather remember that these feelings exist because our particular needs were not met. And the next principle is that the more we hear others' feelings as a reflection of their needs, the easier it is to understand them without hearing blame or without needing to agree or without feeling responsibility for their emotions. So let's say that you are listening to someone who is super angry and is saying all sorts of things, including things that are blaming towards you. And if you were to see their expression of their feelings in terms of their needs not being met, then it's possible for you to listen to the person without having to take responsibility for them. This makes it possible for you to listen to and understand the person without feeling like you are being blamed or feeling like you have the responsibility to agree with the person or feeling like you have responsibility for their emotions. It gives you a little bit of a distance that allows you to see the situation more objectively. So it's important that when you express your emotions that you don't use the phrase I feel this because you did this. That again is blaming and judging the other person. Rather, you want to use the phrase I feel this because I need something, or I want something, or I value something. This is a way to hold yourself responsible for your own feelings because you have particular needs. So, using the latter phrasing, I feel this because I need something, helps you to separate the stimulus of the emotion, such as an event or an action, from the root cause, which is the need that is present within you. So, in summary, moving forward, it's important to keep in mind two things. First, if something happens that bothers you in one way or another, ask yourself, what is the need that I have in this situation that is not being met? And root your feelings in that, whatever it is, rather than rooting it to the stimulus of the emotion, which is the event. This way, you can take responsibility for the emotion that shows up. And second, when this event involves someone else and you wish to share your emotions, it's vital to express your emotions using feeling words instead of non feeling words or non feeling grammar. Non feeling words or non feeling grammar have aspects of blame and judgments towards the other person, which brings up defensiveness and it makes it harder to come to a resolution. So, if you are listening to someone who is emotional and is blaming you or others, it's important to see past their judgments and to try to figure out what needs this person might need fulfilled and approach them with openness and kindness. Now, all of these practices are difficult to do. It's so much easier to approach conflicts with blame and judgments. So, practice is really important to change this habit. This week, we'll be practicing recognizing and expressing emotions without blame. Now, best wishes to you all.